how community can turn your life up to 11.
The importance of community this week on the Extreme Personal Finance Show. Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of the Extreme Personal Finance Show. My name is Chris, and joining me this week, my friend Kevin. Kevin, how you doing, man?
Good, let's do this. Let's talk about something, anything. I don't care.
That's awesome. I really appreciate you joining me this week to talk about the importance of community. And for those people that don't know, I mean, you and I have been friends for the last 3, 4 years or so. What, just take a minute and just introduce yourself. Who are you and why are you here?
Yeah, I haven't been on your show, even though you've asked, because I'm a slacker. So, um, I'm Kevin. I'm really just a rocker who saved some of my income for decades with my wife, and it added up, and we retired at 43. That was 10 years ago. And so we're adjusting to life as this second decade. That sounds so crazy in retirement. We call it fire because retirement was just kind of leaving our career. We don't really work. We do have a little bit of side hustle stuff. And that's not even correct. People pulled us in to do some stuff to help with different things because we've been successful. So I share my random thoughts at life.Fire.com about what it's like in my life in fire. And I don't know, you and I met a few years ago at a CampFI. We've met at economies. We've just kind of connected through time, same interests. You almost went on the Monsters of Rock cruise with me, but then my wife took your slot, which was pretty funny. But not for you, it wasn't funny, but for me it was that she wanted to go. So, but hopefully next year we'll both go and we'll just rock out on the lighter side of the extreme. And
That's
so
awesome.
that kind of brought me to the discussion with you is communities. That's an interesting community, and economy is another community. And you have a lot of communities. So it's not extreme money, but boy, for introverts, this is an extreme concept.
We know the importance of belonging, right? Belonging in whether or not it can be a local community to you, like where you live, but also a much broader community. And I've started to again be included in this personal finance community, but then also you and I are involved in, the heavy metal community. And it's interesting because I just read like a recent study. It says 20% of adults do feel some sort of loneliness in their lives. And actually, the American Medical Association says that by not having a sense of community and having that sense of loneliness, there's an increased health risk. Like you can actually increase the risk of stroke or heart disease. And so I think it's really important to try to find those people, find those birds of a feather that you can flock together with, right? Leaning on community for all sorts of things.
I I don't know. I agree. The studies actually show more well-being with communities. Um, and I don't sometimes I wonder who they interview all those things. So we should stay that, right?
That's
There's
true.
all kinds of statistics, but I'm a total introvert. Like I can go for weeks with my wife's traveling with her family or she's visiting her family where I don't talk to anybody. I don't have
I,
any
I
problem with
don't
that.
believe that, Kevin. How
I
can you
know,
be
is
an
that
introvert?
weird?
That is weird.
But I just went to the economy conference where I saw Chris again, and there was 500 financial independence people, which you could say are money nerds, and most of them are introverts. It was the loudest gathering of introverts I've ever heard in my life, right?
Right? It was so crazy. There were some groups where it's like it was so loud we had to like leave to have a conversation.
There were people that were wearing their eargasms in like the brewery because of it, and I never tried that before.
Right, right.
So, I right, we've heard the studies in retirement specifically about community. That's my interest, being retired early. And I'm in the Rock Retirement Club with this Roger Whitney, the retirement answer man. So there's lots of discussions in there about people that shift into this it's almost a solitary or single or coupled phase of life that they lose so many connections. And studies talk about losing your social connections can take years off your life because you just don't have that energy and that openness and and the connections with other people. And you think about that phase in life where you're less mobile, you're less able to do things, and we take that now to a phase of life where you and I are old. We're in the second half of a century, barely.
Dude, that
And
makes me
so
that sounds so old.
I know it's so funny. And so, but we don't feel much different, but it's harder to have community. I was listening to Jordan Grummett's podcast, Earn and Invest, and he just happened to have a community episode. And I was running around the mountain exercising yesterday, and he talked about two different communities, types of communities, which I thought was interesting. One was identity, those people around you in the situation, which were things like your high school classmates, right? Your mascot, your college. I'm adding to what he said. Your college, following your college teams and your college buddies. And when you get a little older, maybe you're a parent and your child's in a school and you have other parent friends. We don't have kids, so we don't have any of those parent friends. I don't know what those are called, but that
Right.
is identity, right? There's a religious thing I don't understand. But that's not correct. I don't have religious groups that I attend, so but I see where that community's there, and there's a similar interest. But when you take that to the other type of community, the affinity community, which are interests and passions,
Okay.
and so they differ between maybe phases, school, religion, your community. If you have ethnicity, you're in a
Hmm.
community as soon as you're born. It's just the way it is. But then you can shift towards affinity communities, which have interests and passions, like we just talked about the heavy metal community, the financial independence or money community. Before the episode, we were talking about in detail what some financial independence or people are talking about with their investing and stuff. And both of us were kind of shaking our heads. That's not really our interest. It's
Hmm.
interesting to learn and understand, but it's not our passion. And I'm a believer in passion as well as um, curiosity. So I was just kind of mentioning those two types of communities that are different because we're talking about how community can turn your life up to 11, I guess.
Dude, I love that. And I think, and you hit something, it's interesting you talk about those two different types of community because that was something that broke for me when I left the workforce because, you know, identity was so much tied to what I did, right? I was a senior system engineer for this tech company, and it's like,
And now you're just a senior.
yeah, right. But it's like once, and that I was so tied to that as my identity, and that's how I connected with so many other people. And now all of a sudden, I'm not that. So I was like, you and I had conversations like 6 months after I left. I was kind of like having almost like a breakdown, like, well, where do I fit? How do I belong? I got to find this sense of community. And again, you really helped me kind of walk me back from the ledge, I guess, so to speak. But so what are some ways that community can really like I think community can do things like I mean, they can mentor others, they can I mean like we go to these conferences and again you start to learn other things and you can really do things like build a stronger future because of community. You can thrive because of community. Um, I don't know. What are your thoughts there? Like, how can we use community to really, I guess, better our lives?
You make an interesting point is you use the word senior in your job position,
Hmm.
which talk like I'm a psychologist. I have no idea. I'm just a random dude whose brain works too much. But you use the word senior, which shows the proud internal feelings of your success in climbing through different levels of accomplishment, we'll call it. And it was recognized by one of the best companies in the world. And there's no one could take that from you, except for the fact that the technologies in your role will not be there in a
Right.
couple more years, right? It'll be well past what you did. And I always just tell people I was a computer guy at Honeywell Aerospace, but my official title was International Architect, Infrastructure Architect. No, no, global, see, I forget. Global Infrastructure Architect. That was
Dude,
my
that sounds
title.
impressive, buddy.
It is, but it was no big deal. I was just a computer guy who connected aerospace sites around the world with different systems back to the US master system and all this stuff. So I traveled around the world multiple times. It was a cool job. I just thought I was a computer guy because that's what I did at work, even though I was interested in it. And so from those two perspectives, we both excelled in what we probably ever thought we would do when we were 17 or
Right.
21, right? It's just crazy. But I think for you, you can still do technology. You can add technology. You're doing all kinds of audio and video. You have AI technologies. You have VR and AR technologies you're doing. You have app development. You have, wow, we should probably talk about these passions and prioritization at some point. But
Yeah.
still, so you're able to continue the core of what you believe, but without the group of people. I don't have that same sense. Imagine if you were a doctor or a lawyer who left your profession as Dr. So and so, which you'd introduce yourself as Dr. So and so. Or as Jordan Doc G said, some of his colleagues would make reservations as Dr. Smith at the restaurant,
Hmm.
which so when you leave your profession, you no longer can really do those same core interests at home unless you're doing medical care at home, helping people with splinters. Right? So that's
Right.
a different thing of how two different mindsets transitioning from a work community into a non-work post-work community is something I think about in the Rock Retirement Club all the time. And so stepping back from your question, how can people improve or enhance or modify? I think it really comes down to people that I've talked with and even myself is what are your interests? What are those around you? What do those people around you have interest in? My wife's interests differ from mine. So we overlap a little, but we support each other's parallel paths, which is fascinating and rare, I think. So I think understanding that perspective of your work is such a huge part of your life, and it's an extreme part of your cash flow that makes the rest of your life possible. So you focus on that, and some people fixate on that. And that's where younger people are like, oh, I just work and do my job, and I want to work for somewhere I love and a company that does what I love. And then the old people say, well, it doesn't work that way in the real world. So sometimes it seems like whatever's Gen Z is thinking more in their life mode than the rest of us Gen X old people think about in the work career mode. So that's the first thing I thought. What do you think about those?
I agree. I agree. I think that, and actually, so as you're talking through that, I started thinking and remembering back how powerful the community is that I became a member of when I met you and I went to CampFI and my journey and my path to, you know, allowing me to leave corporate America, pursue my own passions and interests and stuff, which again, like you said, I think it's really important we talk about that at some point. But my ability to have really great connections and conversations with those people, you and there was so many other people, right? We mentioned Doc G, but there were so many other people in the community. It really helped me to have the confidence, right? To lift me up to say, you know what? I've earned the opportunity to take chances. I've earned the opportunity to do other things and be able to leave my employer earlier than what I had expected. So I think that it's because of community that I was able to be more confident, right? And to really listen to others that have been there before me. That's why I think it's so powerful to surround yourself with those people that have those similar interests. And
I was thinking they always say you're the average of the five people you surround yourself with.
yeah,
And a couple years ago, you surround yourself with fired people. And so you have to be careful because for you, it's turned out well and it's going well. But there's a lot of pressure there without being pressured, right?
sure. No, I agree. I agree. One thing, it's interesting you said that, we can still, find our interests. We can surround ourselves with community. And, you know, one thing I love doing, like I've been blogging since 2017. I love sharing information and knowledge around personal finance. Again, I'm not an expert, right? But I can share my experiences and I can do my own research and I can just try to spread the word. But it was interesting. I was meeting with a friend of mine. She has brand new baby twins, and so we met for coffee, and I got to hold these little tiny bundles of joy. But she was there with her nanny because she has 5 kids under the age of 4.
Ooh,
So she was there with her nanny, but her nanny was 18 in high school, and it was interesting because she actually was asking like, well, man, I would love for you to help me with understanding how to invest. I would love to do that, but I don't know anything about it. And I really was like, man, that's so awesome that you're young enough, like you're young enough where you can really use the runway to your advantage, right? You can start compounding now, but that they were open to just asking and so I start thinking of like, man, she becomes part of the community, even just, you know, on the edges, because I mean, again, she's younger, but start to become part of that community now, and it can really change your life down the road for sure.
what's fascinating is I had that same discussion about how to invest some savings with a relative who was 59 2 weeks
Mm,
ago. They had savings, but they were just putting it aside because they're supposed to, but they don't know what to do with it.
right.
Never mind the structure of how you're going to use that in a handful of years when they leave their career, or even more important is how to prepare those assets for the use, right? So you have the putting it aside and figuring out how to let it do its magic to get to a number so that when you leave your career, you need to use that. It's deferred spending, right? You didn't spend it in the past and you need to spend it in the future. But you can't just turn it all on and spend it on day one. You have to have some structure in the last and protective mode, hopefully, in the last few years of employment, even 5 or 10 years, to avoid market volatility and protect some of that money. So the money that you're going to be using in the first years of retirement, and you hopefully will have some kind of social capital like Social Security, or the seniors here might have a little piece of a pension or something. But I've heard multiple times, it feels like the past couple of weeks, it could have been just economy, it felt like weeks. A couple people said, yeah, when I was starting my career at 19 or 23, someone pulled me aside and said, put money away here. And that's super important. You'll never miss it as your income goes up, assuming your salary goes up, and put it into equity stock market fund that's low cost. This is what we have at the company. And people said they did that. And when they saw it grow, they were more interested in doing that. And over decades, that adds up. My dad taught me that stuff at 12, how to save parts of my allowance and stuff. And it was pretty lame when you're a teenager. But he also taught me delayed gratification. If you want something, wait, make sure you know what you want, save up and buy it later. And those two pieces are the only reason we retired early is because it was built into me from 12 years old until I met my wife in my early 20s, got married at 25, and we just continued on that. And she figured out I had everything together, was organized, and she just worked through that. And so we both have retired, and it's been great. And um,
But let's be honest, she really liked the long-haired rocker in you, right?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what she was thinking. I still don't know what happened. I turned out much better later, I think. But it's funny. Chris and I had old pictures of each other shared on the gathering, and so there's still some core of us in there. We're just seniors now. It's hilarious.
That's right. That's right.
We're extreme.
That's
Do
awesome.
you? So I, I just take over because why
Yeah.
not?
No, go
Um,
ahead.
so sometimes communities are a larger community, like we've talked about the heavy metal community, or your local community that you see at shows, or at Economy where there's 500 money nerds, or at Monsters of Rock where the cruise I went to had 4,000, sorry, probably 3,000 people on the ship. And there were so many people that had seen each other before. It was like their community, like their little reunion, which is what Economy is. And CampFI is a smaller version of that. And the reason I mention these is not because it's because you have discussions that help you solidify beliefs, opinions, and focus towards the future.
Mm,
And what's funny is I said beliefs, opinions, focus. It's not money talk. It's really
right.
life. The
It
money
is.
stuff kind of just sorts itself out. And in retirement, I tell people the money is what the money is. You can't magically, if you're going to retire at 65 or 62 or 59 and a half, you can't in the year before magically make those numbers puff up. So they are what they are. But what you can do is you can make your life happiness, activity, interest better, which is part of this community thing. And there's communities that are groups that get together for interests. Sometimes these groups can motivate.
Yep.
They often encourage each other,
Absolutely.
and they push.
Yeah, encouragement is huge, I think, and accountability, right?
Yeah, and I think it also helps having discussions because you and I knew each other just on and off. Well, really, pretty much on for the past 3 or 4 years, and we share whatever because there's a trust that's kind of inherent in initial discussions in this community, which is different than a mastermind. Like I wouldn't say you or I are a mastermind, but there are groups that are paid masterminds or formed together with the intent of not engineering the betterment, but actually driving the improvements. They're often coaching type groups, but masterminds are targeted for the growth. Whereas I think the affinity groups are an interest that allows more openness. Whereas a mastermind, I'm not really in masterminds, but I would think it's very purposeful and it's takes a little longer to break down that trust or break open the trust, I guess. So you've joined different groups and so what types of groups, just in general, do you have groups that are motivating, entertaining, educating? How do those work?
Yeah, man. So I think one of the broader communities is, like we mentioned, the music community. I think, going to shows, going to live shows. I mean, there is something about being with, hundreds, if not thousands of others that are all banging their heads, waving their fists in unison to the music. And you can look to the person ahead of you and give a high five and sing together with the band. Like, I just can't explain the uh the sense of community and togetherness because you're all there for that shared experience. And again, regardless of music genre, right? I just think that there's a sense of community there that is like no other. So
Give me
that's
details.
one.
I want to know. I'm going to hit you.
Yeah.
Outside that building,
Mhm.
do you connect with those people? How does that work?
Yeah, there are a few. So we'll connect like on Facebook. Like again, a really good friend of mine, we met at a meet and greet at a local show. Okay. We were in line waiting for a meet and greet. We connected, talked about previous shows, talked about our musical interests, talked about everything. We shared our contact information on Facebook. Then we continually, that's not the right word.
Yeah, I'm
We,
with you there.
we then he was like my concert buddy locally. We would go to a dozen other shows. We even formed a music podcast together and did almost 100 shows of that podcast over 3 years. So we absolutely connect outside of that.
That,
So
that I
does that
think
make
that's
sense?
a good point, is taking the community and then making it tightly personal is a harder piece, but without the first piece of entering the community, the second piece is impossible. I could take that to 11 by saying I was on the cruise in the buffet
Yeah,
grabbing some mashed potatoes and Chris Holmes of Wasp standing next to me,
I love
which
it.
is the worst, wrongest sentence you could imagine. Chris Holmes, if you've ever watched The Decline of Western
Dude,
Civilization
he's
Part
just
2,
like lounging in the pool with his
yeah, it's
freaking.
just he's alive. He's alive because he got the mashed potatoes right after me, which is so wrong. And we were standing by the pool watching a band set, and my wife loves Tesla. And so I said, "Hey Kathy, Jeff Keith's right next to me." And she looks over, she's like, "Oh my God." He's like, and he's practically the same height as her. And so he was like 3 feet away, and some people were talking to him. We didn't. But the side note of that is, you want to talk about community? Jeff Keith is the singer from Tesla, sells millions of albums, still active. His voice is, he's hanging in there. But what I realize is he loves this. So he's
Mhm.
standing 3 feet from us. We're watching Queensryche, who has a new singer.
Oh, love it.
He's everything, Todd LaTorre to them. He's really driving the band. And they're singing an old song from like The Warning or something where you've really got to belt out Jeff Tate step.
Yep.
And Jeff Keith is standing next to me and he's clapping and his hands are like this while Todd LaTorre is belting out Jeff Keith super powerful vocals, which I'm sorry, belting out Jeff Tate. And Jeff Keith is next to me, who could never hit any of that power because he's a totally different style and guy,
Hmm.
clapping, impressed that his peer is singing this. Jeff Keith is loving this. He's in his community of his brothers with his fans who are his community, high, well-paying fans to be there. So just in his sense, in that moment, he was just loving hearing Queensryche. And Tesla came out in what, 86,
Yeah.
87. So as a rocker, he probably listened to The Warning and stuff back in 83, 84. So he probably kind of grew up on that. So he's a fan. He's in
Yeah.
his community. He could have been backstage downstairs where a lot of people, Tracy Guns was hanging out there and
Right.
all these other people. And so, like, community hits everybody at a different level, those above you, those below you. In his case, they were fans that are like not as visible, but he was feeling it. 3 days later, there's a video online of Stephen Piercy of Rat, it's called, playing at the pool stage, and Jeff Keith is literally in the front row, arms on the stage, clapping to Stephen Piercy because he probably listened to Out of the Cellar and
Sure.
Invasion before he was in Tesla.
So this actually comes back to something that you and I talked about last weekend. Was I think you're very much a cheerleader of others. You like to see others succeed. You like to see others grow. And so that's part of community too, right? Like you mentioned, encouraging others to lifting, like, we talked about this before. You want someone that's going to lift you up versus knock you down. And it's very clear you can see the differences. And if you're a part of that community that can really lift others up, there is no better feeling. Like I love doing that too. I like lifting others up as well. Seeing them succeed, man, it's such a great feeling. I mean, if they're your friends or part of the community, like there's part people in the community that, I'm not close friends with, but when you see them do amazing things, like, yeah, you want to lift those people up.
You do that so much that you don't realize. This podcast in itself is a huge effort that you schedule, structure, build, pay money to set up just to give other people thoughts, perspectives, something for them. So I agree with you on that. And I thank you for saying that because somewhere along the way, I've realized, not on purpose, but when you give, you get back much more in return. And I didn't even really, I've always heard that. And I thought, yeah, that's just softy people giving stuff away. Like, I'm just my own person. I'm just doing my own thing. Be responsible for myself. But you do get more back. And you, by giving out, from your effort and your personality and your blog and your podcast and your friendships, I think that's multiplies going out and hopefully coming back to you. And so I probably need to get going soon, but I wanted to just share with anybody listening that take your interests, find others that have those, and see how it goes. At Economy, I say it's like a family reunion, like of financial independence cousins. And
Mhm.
I do say some of those cousins you don't really get along with. And that's
Right.
okay. You just kind of avoid them, but some of them you just love being around. And I love being around you. And most people do because your energy and your craziness and it's all good stuff. So, do you have a thought on community, how people can find what community they would like? How would they start?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a lot of different ways. There's groups socially on Facebook, there's meetup.com, there's other groups. Find I like now again, you can obviously join those groups online, but I really do enjoy the in-person component to some of those groups. I manage and I'm the admin for a local personal finance group that happens monthly here in the Twin Cities. And I will tell you, getting 15 or 20 people in the same room and having community driven conversation around everything from life to personal development to, you know, I mean, it can be anything. Like I remember someone's asking, well, how can I get my 14-year-old involved in investing? Or, you know what? I'm thinking of selling my house. Let's have a discussion around renting versus owning. I mean, it's anything and everything. And I can't explain just the wonderful feeling of meeting together in person and having these in-person discussions. That's one thing that I would recommend. Find those groups that you want to connect with. Try to meet in person. It definitely helps.
I agree with that. And I've seen just last weekend at Economy, I've seen people come up to you, multiple people, and talk to you about different things, get your contact information, have a connection from something you shared, gave, or open about. And a few times I looked at you, I'm like, am I invisible? What's up with that? Which was kind of funny because the ladies were heading for you
No.
with their phone. You were bumping phones. I saw you. It was, and you know what? That's the openness that kind of in real life you don't really do, but when you have a connection of an interest, it just is a wonderful starting point. And that's where I don't know if community is the right word, but it's interest. It's a group of interested people who are probably interesting.
Yeah, and I think you said something earlier. Be curious, right? I mean, just ask others, ask a question, and you'd be surprised how many people would love to help you. I think more people are accepting and want to help others than people think. You know what I mean? We want a sense of community. We want a sense of belonging. Every now and then you're going to get that smart ass, but you know what? That's the outlier. So I think as we wrap up today, I think one thing to just one of the key takeaways is that within community, success or growth is much sweeter when it's shared among others and among community. And I think together as a community, we can really build a stronger future for each of us, and we can, overcome setbacks, right? Whether it's divorce or, the unfortunate passing of a friend or a loved one, we can overcome those setbacks and we can really thrive if we're part of that community. So I think it's really important to find that tribe, whatever that interest is. Maybe it's a financial tribe, but find your tribe and you certainly can, as you would say, crank success up to 11. That'd be awesome. Cool. So thank you everyone for listening. We really do appreciate it. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Please follow us on YouTube as well. We really would appreciate it. and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. That would be awesome. And we will see you next time on the Extreme Personal Finance Show. Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate it, man.
You think people made it to the end of this?
I don't know.